Well, it's 05:30 time for lunch, and tonight I am shoving boxes from one conveyor to another. Not every box, just some of them. And it really doesn't require any kind of mental exertion, so that gave me time to think. But then my thinking was interrupted by tonight's funny package, and it was a flat box. I had just enough time to look at it. It was a charcuterie board. And I looked it up on our first break, and this thing cost almost $100. It also contains a knife. Charcuterie is cold cuts. It's a French word for cold cuts. I looked that up too. I never knew that because we have a charcuterie place in town. It's been there for a while. It must do pretty brisk business during the tourist season. I always thought it was just a coffee shop, but they serve cold cuts, I'm sure, cheese, and a lot of wine. It's wine and cheese is what it is, really. You know, I certainly am in no position to spend $100 on a cutting board. Some people might be, that's great. But, you know, I just picture the kind of people, two kinds of people basically who would want this. The first would be the younger couples that you see on those TV shows where they're looking at houses and they have to decide which one they want. You know, he's works at an auto parts store. She's a fun-loving social worker, and they're looking for their second beach house. Their budget, $3.5 million. You know the kinds of shows, right? But they always want an open floor concept, you know, where you can see everything, maybe even including the John, I don't know, because they like to entertain. They're the kind of people who are going to spend $100 on a cutting board. The other kind of people would be your somewhat older, retired folks who did well in life, you know, and the husband would be sitting there reading something online and go, "Hun, have you heard of charcuterie?" And she'd say, "Oh, they were talking about that on The View. Should we call our broker?" "Yes, I'm thinking so." And they could spend $100 on a cutting board once they figured out it wasn't a stock, it was, you know, cold cuts. Anyway, it's time to eat my lunch before I go back to shoving boxes around. Hey, if you can afford $100 for a cutting board and a cheap paring knife, salute. See you next shift.